We're going to be turning now to Janatan Sayeh. He is a research analyst focused on Iran at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. You know, from a policy and security perspective, how credible are the reported U.S. options that are on the table against Iran, and what risks do they pose to regional stability?
So we heard there might be a potential strike of the Wednesday of last week that did not materialize. So just comparing the assets in the region a couple of weeks ago compared to right now, it signals to us that if there were to be an attack, the idea here is that they're preparing for major Iranian retaliation, which means the initial strike by the United States is not going to be limited in scope. But that said, there's another option on the table that many are discussing is trying to choke Iran's routes to China when it comes to illegal oil shipments. That said, there are easier ways of limiting and reducing Iranian oil exports. You don't need to deploy an entire fleet just to reduce that. Simply pressuring China, similarly to what they did in the first Trump administration, actually sending the Iran Action Group to Beijing, letting them know that if they continue to purchase Iranian oil, the major banks are going to be sanctioned by the United States. And that was enough of a deterrent the first time around. So there are other means in place. When you see a fleet of this size, paired with the fact that the Trump administration, again, first signaled diplomacy, but mentioned that there's another option on the table, it is exactly echoing what we saw prior to the 12-day war, that they pursued diplomacy first, but they were not at all reluctant to pursue a kinetic strike against the Islamic Republic.
Now, I want you to break this down for our viewers. Saudi Arabia, including Turkey, they appear to be pushing back against a broader military confrontation. They're among several Gulf states that are very expressly stating to the world and to U.S. President Trump that they don't think that the fall of the Islamic regime is necessarily going to bring stability to the region. But we do know that the Islamic regime has been exporting violence and terror through its acts of resistance, funneling money and support to organizations, terror groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis in Yemen, for years now. So explain to our viewers how this makes sense. Why is it that Gulf states are so worried about the Islamic regime falling?
To put it in short, the Persian Gulf states and Turkey are benefiting from a weak Islamic Republic, and that's a key term here. So originally, going back a few years, the Islamic Republic in 2019 was not even only relying on proxies against Saudi Arabia, was actually launching attacks from mainland Iran against Aramco. So when we look at that and compare to Iran right now, there's been a rapprochement between Riyadh and Tehran. From the regional, countries, the way to look at it is their sweet spot is to have an Islamic Republic that is weakened. And that allows these countries to be the only one that are exporting the oil. Of course, Qatar and Saudi both share a lot of reserves with gas and oil with Iran. They don't want to be competing with Iran in a theoretical sense if sanctions were to be lifted. Similar with Turkey. Turkey and Qatar, given that their Muslim Brotherhood states are benefiting from this Islamic regime, they have a shared interest in supporting Hamas. Of course, Turkey has facilitated a lot of Iranian money laundering operations, similar with the Emirates. Another angle is, again, it's a lot of uncertainty for these states. They don't know what's going to replace the Islamic Republic. It might be a scenario of chaos, which again is not good, which is not really beneficial to them, even though that's less likely. The better scenario for Iranians is if there were to be a nationalist government inside Tehran, and that again is not good news for the region because again you have a new competitor coming around. So as long as the regime is under sanction and is weakened, it's not a competitor. That is a great situation for these regional allies. That said, the real buy-in that's needed is from Israel because it is the only country that does have experience striking Islamic Republic sites and is the only intelligence apparatus that is active on Iranian streets and has the capacity on the ground to carry out operations. That's why if there were to be a kinetic strike, Israel's buy-in is much more important of that of Saudi Arabia's or Turkey's.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us, Janatan. Very interesting to hear your perspective on this. As per usual, we're going to have to wait and see how this plays out.